And when people like Dan Andrews tell you we're all in this together, well, it doesn't include them, but it does include you and I. Our inflation has gone through the roof. It seems like interest rates are going to be going gradually up and up and up and up, but there's something more at stake. And there's some news that you're not hearing, some news that you are not hearing, and why the mainstream media, and I've got to say the woke churches, and I won't be too hard on them today, but I'm going to go there, why they are remaining silent on the slaughter of thousands. We're not talking about one incident. We're talking about thousands of Christians in Nigeria slaughtered in cold blood. You don't hear about it. No one gives a rip. I don't know whether it's because, maybe if it was on the reverse and it was a bunch of Christian people attacking Muslim people. And by the way, I've got Muslim friends, I've got Jewish friends, I've got straight friends, I've got gay friends, I've got them all. This is not about that. This is about an insidious plan to suppress truth and to suppress what's really going on. The slaughter of thousands of Christians. Secondly, this whole transgender thing that's going on at the moment. It's almost like society's been vomited upon ever since this crazy virus was launched on our planet. And then, of course, this whole thing of climate change. Now we've got Adam Bandit, as I like to call him, Adam Bandit, who doesn't even have the moral sense and the dignity to stand alongside an Australian flag. What an insult to Australians. What a moron. This guy, I'm sorry if I get passionate about this, he needs to be kicked to the curb. He doesn't deserve the money that taxpayers pay. We pay for this moron to insult us and insult our nation. And I've got no problem calling him a moron, because he is a moron. He is a moron, and if he cares to, he can come on this show and let's debate some stuff and have the hard questions, and I'll have myself and two of my guests that are here to debate this fool and the people that actually voted for him. Seriously, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? They bring economic disaster. They bring a threat to our future with our children, and, of course, they despise people of faith. Well, today I've asked my great friend James Macpherson to come on board. He's a lot more calmer than I am, but I'll tell you what, he's loaded with information, and we're trying to get through to George Christensen. James, how are you? Thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Pat. It's great to talk to you.
James, you wrote an article a few weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, on the plight of Christians in Nigeria. And we're going to attack all three things today, guys. We're going to attack the transgender thing and the climate change, but just bear with me, because this is so vitally important. And you highlighted the fact, and it was brilliantly written in Spectator magazine, how, a big mega church in Sydney was, paying homage to George Floyd, but never said a word about the slaughtering of people of faith in Nigeria. Tell us what's going on over there, James, and please don't hold back.
Well, I was just shocked to learn that on Pentecost Sunday, more than 50 Nigerian Christians gathered to worship were slaughtered by Islamic gunmen. And what was just as shocking as the slaughter was that it barely made news anywhere around the world. Unfortunately, these 50 Nigerian Christians were the wrong kind of victims, and they were gunned down by the wrong kind of killers. If they were Muslim rather than Christians, well, then it would have garnered worldwide attention. And if only they'd been slaughtered by white people rather than blacks, the world would have cared. But Christians are third-tier victims, and black lives seem to matter if they're killed by whites, preferably white police. And so murdered African Christians serves no political agenda, and therefore it's swept under the carpet and the whole world moves on. Really, the Eiffel Tower should be lit up in the green and white of the Nigerian flag, or, some world should don Catholic garb, like New Zealand Prime Minister Justine Ardern donned a headscarf in solidarity with Muslims who were horrifically killed in Christchurch. But no one does that for the Christians in Nigeria. There's no accusations of Christianophobia. No one believes that even exists, although Forbes magazine recently reported that 1 in 7 Christians around the world is at risk of persecution. And by persecution, I don't mean people saying nasty things. I mean being raped or abducted or murdered. Think about that. 1 in 7 Christians. This isn't a church group reporting this. This is Forbes magazine saying 1 out of 7 Christians around the world is at risk of death or rape or abduction because of their Christian faith. And the world is silent about this. The United Nations doesn't talk about it. If they could prove that Israel had something to do with it, then I'm sure they would, because the United Nations loves to denounce Israel. But they certainly don't like to say anything in defense of Christians. And then, as you alluded to, you've got the church in the West, which, to be fair, most pastors probably weren't even aware that as we here in Australia were celebrating Pentecost Sunday without a care in the world, our brothers and sisters in Nigeria were being gunned down. What happened, Pat, was during the service, Islamists came into the church building and set off explosives, collapsing the roof. Then as mums and dads with their children scampered for the exits, they were met by more gunmen who just gunned them down. The attack lasted 30 minutes. Men, women, children just strewn everywhere, shot dead beneath the wooden pews of the church. By the time law enforcement arrived, the killers were long gone, having kidnapped the priest, and there was almost no outrage anywhere around the world. But there wasn't even outrage really in Nigeria. That night, the Prime Minister or President of Nigeria was pictured with senior government officials at a banquet laughing and smiling. So I just think it's horrific that Christians are being slaughtered. And then in church, to be honest with you, you're more likely to hear a welcome to country in one of our churches than you are to hear any sort of prayer or talk about brothers and sisters being martyred for their faith in Jesus in other countries. And I just think that's wrong.
Absolutely, James. And here's the thing that people need to understand. If they're attacking Christians for their faith, everybody's up for grabs. Everybody's up for grabs. When a freedom or a right or an attack is made on any part of society and people stay silent, it will affect all parts of society, as we saw in the case of what happened in the last 2 years. Now, James, this is not an isolated incident, is it? This is happening quite a lot.
No, well, just in Nigeria, last year alone, 4,650 Christians were killed in 470 separate attacks on Nigerian churches. And so that's just happening in Nigeria. And you've made the point, Pat, that we live in a globalized society. George Floyd died in America and the whole world was up in arms about black rights. Now, let's not worry about that issue, but I just raise it to make the point. 4,650 Christians have been killed in Nigeria last year, and yet we don't talk about it at all. And with such interconnectedness around the world, we should be, because what happens overseas invariably comes here.
Do you think it's a purposeful avoidance that the media and governments play? I know we're trying to get George on today. He's had some problems with technology and weather and stuff. Do you think that it's kind of a purposeful thing? Because I know that George was trying to bring the situation to Parliament and really have an inquiry because it affects us. I mean, we've got people in Australia that have fled from Nigeria here, and why the silence? Why the silence, do you think, James?
Well, like I said, I think the death of Christian people worshipping in churches doesn't fit the current narrative, and the current narrative divides everybody into oppressors and the oppressed. And if you're a Christian, you are viewed as a oppressor. And so Christians are the one minority group that don't get any love or support from the media, supranational organizations, or from corporates. It just gets swept under.
James, here's what gets my goat, gets my nose. If you took the church out of society, probably 70 to 80% of the welfare in this country would fall in a heap. And what people forget is it was people like Salvation Army under General William Booth, when the Salvation Army was a Salvation Army. Now they've just become another bastion of wokeness. But they ended so much injustice. It was the revivals of George Finney and some of the others, and Wesley others, that really came out and stood against slavery and injustice. And it's almost now that the ones that were the ones standing up for truth and for freedom are the ones that have been attacked. I said something interesting the other day when I was speaking. I said, if you want to be an extremist, all you've got to do is be a person of faith, get married, and build a home, and you're an extremist. It's almost like, why do you think this attack on the church?
Look, I think there's an attack on truth around the world right now. And I think we're going to talk about the whole trans ideology a bit later in our discussion. So we can come to it then. But I think the church ultimately represents truth. And, Romans chapter 1 talks about in the last days, men will exchange the truth of God for a lie. And professing to be wise, they'll actually become fools. And there are good reasons why the world does not want truth, because if truth doesn't exist, then I can do what I want. And so I think that's the reason why the church is under attack, not because they don't like our worship style, not because they think our beliefs are quaint. It's because the church is the last institution standing for objective truth, saying, no, it's not my truth and your truth. There's only the truth. And a world that is in rebellion against God doesn't want to hear that. And so the church must be suppressed. In fact, Paul uses that word in Romans chapter 1. He says they suppress the truth. And so who stands for truth in popular culture? Well, the church ought to. And if sinful mankind wants to suppress the truth, then to do that, you suppress the church.
James, let's talk about this whole trans ideology. I mean, honestly, before the problem, you almost never heard of this. Almost never. Now, every single flipping day, we have to put up with this stuff. I mean, FINA finally made somewhat of a decent ruling, and the rugby league followed. But even then, James, I'm a bit sus on what they've said, because it seems to me that they're going to accept them swimming if they were had the procedures done before the age of 12. Why this attack on womanhood? Firstly, where are the feminists? Number two, why? I said something the other day, and I want everyone to hear me. This whole thing of sacrificing women on the altar of trans stuff goes back to Genesis and Lot. It goes back there where you got where the angels came and that community wanted. They said, "Yeah, give us these men that we can have our way with." And he goes, "Here's my girls. You take them." James, why all of a sudden this complete obsession with this trans ideology?
It's funny, the debate about trans ideology is actually not a debate about trans ideology. Okay, It's a debate about truth. Okay. If you can't say what a woman is, then you can't say what anything is. I mean, if I sit here and say to you, Pat, am I a woman? I'm not sure. I might be a woman. I'm not really sure. How do I know I'm not a woman? I don't know. If you can't even say what a woman is, then you can't say what anything is. And if you can't say what anything is, then you can't say that anything is wrong. And I think that's the real argument. The argument is over truth. The argument is over reality. The argument is over whether anyone has the right to say that anything is wrong or right. And I think that's why both sides are so invested. People pushing the trans ideology overwhelmingly want to live in a world where nothing is normal and therefore everything is permissible. People like you and I, who are really motivated and agitated to push back against the trans agenda, believe in objective truth and say, hang on a second, this is important. If you're going to deny God and now you're going to deny even biology, then we're going to live in a world where nothing is out of bounds, nothing is beyond approval, and anything goes. And so this debate is a lot more than just whether Leah Thomas should swim in college swim meets. This is a debate about whether truth exists and therefore whether anything can be ruled admissible or not. And so that's why it's got far-reaching implications beyond just women's sporting events.
Now, we just got George Christensen on the line here. George, great to have you on.
Well,
my friend.
Thank you.
George, what's your take on this whole transgender push? It almost seems like it's been vomited on us every single day. And why now? Is it because this pandemic has opened up the vaults for all this nonsense? What's your view and what's your take on this, George?
Well, I mean, I've got two different, well, not two different views, but you could ask me what the theological take on it, but I'm going to give you the secular take on it. Pat, the secular take on it should simply be this, and this seems like a common sense approach. Let adults be adults, right? I mean, if there's a grown man or a grown woman who believes that they are of the opposite gender, and they want to live that lifestyle, well, we're all free human beings. Knock yourself out. You can pretend you're a cat or a dog or a peacock if you want to. But mate, my big thing, and I think most Australians would think, let kids be kids. Let's not do anything that tries to ideologically impose gender fluidity on children. That is just wrong. It's a step too far. And the fact that we have that going on in our schools and our society today is just showing how degenerate things have become. There is two other issues with this. One is we should let women be women as well and not have to compete against biological males, against men in sporting events and perhaps in other areas of life as well. And so, you know, when you have someone that's a biological man that's winning by a country mile in a swimming competition or, you know, a boxing event, heaven help us, I mean, that actually goes on. You know, we need to get rid of that. And so it's good to see that FINA and potentially other sporting bodies are coming out saying that, no, we're no longer going to accept biological men who have told us that they're transgender competing against biological women. I mean, blind Freddie can see that that's an obvious one. Now, the final one, I think, Pat, is this, that you and I and James and everyone else who has a fixed and firm view on it shouldn't have this agenda shoved down our throat. We shouldn't be censored, silenced,
Right.
Made to actually say pronouns that we actually don't agree with. You know, these are things that are anathema to free speech and freedom in general in a democracy. The problem is that society has degenerated. I'll say that word again, degenerated very specifically. We've degenerated into putting identity politics well and truly above freedoms. And that is wrong, and it's going to lead to the unraveling of democracy and society. And I'm not being over the top on that. It already has. When pastors can't talk about specific issues, their free speech has been eroded. And, you know, the question is then, are we a free society? Are we actually a democracy that's supposed to have freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience as one of the pillars of that democratic society? So that's where I think it's at, Pat.
I'm with you, George. James, is there anything you want to add on that? Because I'm a father and a grandfather, and my little granddaughter the other day, she's about 4, and she goes, "I'm a cat," and she started to meow as a cat, and and now lick her hand as a cat. And I straight away thought, if this little girl was given, if this little girl today in our society, they'd say, there you go, she identifies as a cat, therefore she's a cat. I just thank God. When we were growing up and we played cowboys and Indians, back even though we're in Australia, that I didn't get what I wanted at 8 and 9 years of age. These children today have no capacity. Man, they can't even clean their rooms. Firstly, they want to clean up the planet but can't clean their rooms. Secondly, that they've been told that they can change genders at an early age. And interestingly, I watched this program by Matt Walsh, and I've been reading a lot about this. And I know this may sound extreme, but I don't think it is. This, to me, borders on the mutilation that happened in the Second World War under Nazi Germany. Because to me, there's nothing, these things are irreversible. And to put a child under that kind of pressure, and, Andy Griffin in one of those shows said, look, the best a parent can do is not let a child fall for every bright, shiny thing that comes along. It goes to catch something bright and shiny and there's a hook in it, and by then it's too late. What we need to say is, wait, no, not yet, because I think there's wisdom in that. And part of it is that our society is more obsessed, and I want to speak to fathers here, we are more obsessed with a child's feeling than we are about their future and their direction. James, is there anything you'd like to add before we move on to one that's really, really stirring me here, and it's the state of our nation's economy? Is there anything you want to add to that, James, and that issue? I know you've had a lot and written a lot about it.
It's interesting. There was a story out of America just in the last couple of weeks where the New York City Council has spent $200,000 hiring drag queens to go into public schools to read books to children. And you ask yourself, well, why would they do this? Why drag queens reading to children? And they said it's because we're trying to combat homophobia and we're trying to combat intolerance, as if there's a homophobe within every child just waiting to get out if a drag queen doesn't first read to them and convince them. And here's the kicker, that not just that they should be tolerant, but there's nothing wrong with a man dressing as a slutty woman and cavorting around. And so the point of the push of trans ideology onto children is the normalization of it. And that's by their own admission. They say, we want to get rid of intolerance. Well, to do that, they're going to normalize this kind of behavior to children so that then children grow up thinking this is perfectly reasonable, perfectly normal. Now, as George already said, if men want to dress as women and cavort around, then good luck to them. If it makes them happy, hey, do whatever makes you happy. But this insidious push of these things on children who are too young to understand sexuality at all, let alone LGBTQ in all its different rainbow variations. This is an agenda pushed by adults who want the world to be a certain way, and it's too late to do it with you and I. So they'll go into public schools and they'll start to mess with the conception of children, and this is wrong and ought not be tolerated.
Pat,
George,
can I jump in?
Yes, please. Go ahead, George.
I was just going to say that there's a transgender conservative activist by the name of Blair White over in the States, and she posted something or tweeted something out the other day, which I thought was pretty poignant. She said, when you're exposing kids to drag queens and drag shows, and thinking that somehow is teaching kids how to respect transgender people, you're essentially doing the same thing as taking a kid to a strip club or introducing a kid to a stripper to respect women. I mean, in the context of what they're trying to do, which I disagree with, they're actually failing miserably as well because they're going to tropes and stereotypes. But mate, to show how bizarre our clown world is these days, you talk about transgender, and you talked about your daughter wanting to be a kitten. I mean, there is actually now transspeciesm going on. A US court, I believe a court in California, has ruled that bumblebees can actually be fish this week. So if bumblebees can be fish, your daughter can be a cat. We can be whatever we want. I'm going to identify, as the old meme goes, as an attack helicopter.
Guys, the world's gone, man. Now, George, we spoke before you came on the plight of Nigerian Christians, and I want to get on to the third one. Today's theme is the three things being led to the slaughter: our children, our worship, and we'll get to our climate and our resources in a second. George, you mentioned to me a fair bit over the phone about plight of Christians in Nigeria, and you actually brought this before Parliament. Am I correct?
That's right. I brought this issue before Parliament. I also, sadly, because this got nixed as COVID hit, I was trying to organise a delegation of MPs and senators to go over to Nigeria to speak to Christians firsthand, but the pandemic came and that went to the wayside. But I was in discussions with the Barnabas Fund, which are a great organisation that are helping Christians in areas of need, such as Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the hotspots where we know that there's attacks by the government on Christians, attacks by the militia on Christians, by Fulani Muslim tribesmen. There are so many deaths that almost, you don't hear or see anything about this in the mainstream media per se, but perhaps that's because it's just become so commonplace in that country, and they have a huge Christian population in Nigeria. So we're not talking about a really small minority of people. But Pat, I pushed a specific campaign which said that we should, heaven help me for suggesting that we employ another bureaucrat, but America has this thing called an ambassador for religious freedom. Now, I suggested that Australia implement the same thing. We have all these roving ambassadors for various different issues, for women and gender issues. We have one for nuclear non-proliferation. We have one for countering terrorism. So there's a range of these different roving international ambassadors that basically do a lot of work in the United Nations and in other international fora. And I suggested that we have one for religious freedom because that would send a strong signal where Australia is taking a stance in confronting these regimes where there is persecution of Christians and other people of faith.
Well, we're going to make this part of our mandate here on our program to really raise awareness. But I've got about 10, 12 minutes left. Let's talk. Well, number one was the worship they want to slaughter. Number two, the minds of our children. But number three, our finances. Pharaohs have always wanted people's finances, their worship, and also their children. It seems to me that ever since, it seems to me for quite a while now, that the Greens and the climate change agenda is wreaking havoc on our economy. And right now they are lapping it up. And as well as that, throwing out the door a lot of the things that we hold dear. For example, Albanese, the ink hasn't dried in his paper, and they're already wiping 60 million off Christian chaplaincy funding. And I said this was going to happen. This was a Greens agenda. George, what's happening to our country economically because of all this climate change BS?
Mm-hmm. Well, Pat, just to start on the chaplaincy issue that you've referred to, not only have they wiped a whole heap of funding out of chaplaincy, but they've also removed the requirement for there to be a religious element to chaplaincy. So basically now they've been devolved into nothing other than guidance counsellors, and schools already have that. So Labor's basically gotten rid of the chaplaincy program. You've asked about the economy, though. I mean, look, a lot of this does have to do, the energy issue particularly does have to do with the climate change policies we've adopted in this country. I see the International Energy Agency today is coming out and saying that there's about $8.5 billion worth of coal projects that actually should be happening in Australia but aren't because of regulatory issues and other burdensome government imposts. I mean, that doesn't have something to do with our energy issues per se, but it just shows you the bent against coal is causing a lot of problems, because $8.5 billion worth of investment is a lot of jobs, mate, a lot of jobs in the part of the world that I used to represent, the Bowen Basin. And so because this is bent against coal, a bent towards renewables, which we shouldn't call renewables, we should call them unreliables. We have a situation now where, you know, dweebs like Matt Keane are up there saying that people need to not use their washing machines, their dishwashers. That's just crazy stuff. And look, we are going to be subject to blackouts without a doubt. It's coming. You're just going to have to brace yourself. And that was always going to happen. You know, you can't think that you are going to base your energy grid off wind and solar, which are unreliable, and not have to pay the price down the track. And we are now going to pay it, not just domestically, but industrially as well. That's already happening, where businesses are either shutting down or having large shutdowns because of the energy crisis the nation's going through.
Yeah, well, James?
Well, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Australia has enormous amounts of gas and coal and uranium, and yet right now our major cities are being warned of blackouts in the middle of our coldest start to winter in 30 years here in Sydney. Can you imagine if New Zealand had a woolly jumper shortage? It would be ridiculous. There would be there's sheep everywhere. How could they have a woolly jumper shortage? Well, we have cheaper, more reliable energy than pretty much any country in the world, and yet we've got an energy shortage. And it's because physics trumps green economics. Wind and solar won't keep the lights on in Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne. If we had more coal plants operating right now, there'd be no problem with supply or with price. It's ludicrous that in one of the most energy-rich nations on earth, we are being told, don't use your dishwasher between 5:30 and 8:30 p.m. because we might have blackouts. This is entirely predictable. Our politicians deliberately malign coal and gas. And so this is not an accident. This is not, because of the temperatures. This is because of the idiocy of ideologically driven politicians.
Do you know, I was watching. Pardon me, George, go ahead.
I was going to say, and why? I mean, you know, the end of the day, politicians, I agree with you, James, but politicians don't do such things on a whim. You always got to ask the question, why? Why have they driven this? And the answer, as it normally is money. I mean, there have been, you got to say, why have some of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest investment houses in the world, like BlackRock and Vanguard, and even companies that were once coal companies like Rio and BHP said, we're moving away from this fossil fuel investment and we're going to go into renewables. Why have they pushed this carbon agenda? Because there's a whole heap of money to be made out of carbon trading. Why do you think banks are so keen on it? So follow the money and you will find out why. You mentioned New Zealand. I've got to tell you, they're fleecing us right now, James. Meridian, I believe, is one of the big investors in wind power, I think it is, in Australia. And that is a wholly owned company of the New Zealand government. So while Australia is suffering, a foreign government is making money out of us mugs right now. Follow the money. This has been all about money, and now as I said, we're going to pay the price for it.
It seems to me it's following the money rather than following the science. What I find amazing is, FINA makes this ruling on the transgender thing because they followed the science. Now all of a sudden the woke globalists don't want to follow the science. And it seems to me that there's this global agenda almost everywhere where you watch news from all over the world. It's the same rhetoric, the same voices. Now, I've got to kind of wind this up in a moment, guys, but George, you have launched an amazing program, and I've got to tell you, I'm loving what you've been doing there with the whole exposing the sons of Davos there and the World Economic Forum. Where can people follow you? Where do we find you? How can they subscribe to these brilliant pieces that you're doing? I'm loving it, both you and James, but let's talk to you. Where can we find you and how can we find you?
Thanks. Well, James and I are now both prolific Substack writers, and his publication is pretty good too. But you can find mine at nationfirst.substack.com. You can sign up for free if you want, just to get a free weekly newsletter, or you can pay and you will be given a daily newsletter. And yes, we are doing a series where we're exposing the disciples of Davos, people in Australia and outside of Australia who are very influential in current events that have key ties to the World Economic Forum and are pushing this great reset agenda. We need to know who they are, because being forewarned is being forearmed.
Once you finish that series, I want to have you on there so we can talk about it. So thanks, George. I know you've got some problems there with power and stuff, so we'll let you go. But please follow George Christensen, outstanding man. Now, James Macpherson, my third best friend in the whole world. James.
What do you mean third?
Well, my wife and God, you're third, mate. But look, and Christine might be listening, so I can't, James, tell us, you get your morning email every morning, just fantastic. I love it. I love all the articles you're doing. Where can people follow you? And stay tuned, guys, because I want to share some things before the end of this and want to really finish with a bang. James, where do we find you? How can we find you? How can we stalk you, find your material? And it's brilliant stuff, guys. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I write for the Spectator magazine a couple of times a week, so you can either read me in the Spectator, or if you go to jamesmacpherson.substack.com, jamesmacpherson.substack.com. If you can't remember that, just Google it. You can sign up there for free, and every morning at 6 a.m., like clockwork, you'll get a fresh article, just pulling apart faith, culture, politics, just giving you a different angle, usually humorous, but always trying to help see beyond the spin. And you'll get that every morning to enjoy with your coffee, Pat.
I love it. I love it. And tonight you're on the Bolt Report. How good is that?
Yeah, I'm on the Bolt Report tonight with Senator Matt Canavan, talking about the news of the day. No idea what we're talking about, but 7:30 tonight, it'll be good.
Well, I tell you what, Matt Canavan is one of my heroes. James Macpherson, thanks for being part of it. Now, guys, girls, listen to me very carefully. I've been saying for the last 2 years, there are three things, and listen, whether you're a person of faith or whether you're not, it's irrelevant to me. But what is important is you know that there is an agenda, and that agenda is fixed. It's fixed on our children, it's fixed on our economics, and it's fixed on our freedoms. The whole worship thing is really about freedoms. And if we don't do something now, you're not going to have a tomorrow, I'm telling you. And this is why I've been telling people that you've got to take control of your life and take control especially of your finances. Because as I've said, and has been a mantra of mine, if you give them the power to feed you, you give them the power to starve you. Once you get an education and you upskill yourself, they lose power over you. They lose power over you, I'm telling you. And we need to be creating a future for ourselves, for our children, and for our children's children. And I really believe that a lot of this assault on our economy really is because they can do it. I mean, $6 for an iceberg lettuce and $11 for cucumbers. Give me a break. They're trying to, I believe, they're trying to control the land, control food production, but they shouldn't be able to control your economics. With that in mind, listen to me very carefully. Next Wednesday, I'm hosting a special event, and it's going to be a half-day event. I've been able to get two of the leading world teachers in the area of cryptocurrencies. Now, please don't go saying, oh, Bitcoin's dropped. Well, that's when you want to buy Bitcoin, and there's more than just Bitcoin. One of my friends, Darren, did $118,000 in 3 months because there's other coins and other things that you can learn about to really help yourself. Now, this is for beginners, or if you've been around crypto for a while, you know what? You can learn more. And I've got 2 of the world's leading experts. It's going to be a 4-hour session. You want to tune in for the lot. It won't be here on Facebook. You've got to register for it. And there's a registration in the link, mesiti.com/crypto. Now, I've got to tell you, on our Zoom, there's only a capacity for 500 people. This goes globally everywhere, all over the world, guys. And we do this mainly for our Australian market, but we want to help you. And if you want to be part of that, I know people get all freaked out at crypto with digital currency. It's got nothing to do with digital currency and global currency or one world currency. Nothing to do with it. It's actually the very opposite. So, guys, if you want to learn, and I encourage you to learn everything you need in life, you can learn. Listen to me. Ignorance is bliss until the seed of knowledge breaks that blindness over people. We can't afford to be blind. We've got to use today's methods to have a world tomorrow. If we're using yesterday's investments methods in today's world, you're not going to have a tomorrow. So go there, guys. It's free. Get your teenagers on it as well. Man, these kids learn it really fast and helps them become financially independent. So please go there. Please register and show up. A lot of people register for these things and don't show up. What is the point of that? You're only deceiving yourself. So, guys, get a hold of that. Register mesiti.com/crypto. It's free Wednesday morning and Wednesday night. I think we're starting at 10 or 11 p.m., not too sure, and then 6 p.m. on Wednesday night. Go and do that. And I want to leave you with this thought. There is a war right now on our children, and we need. And again, I'm not putting down women. Hear me, because you all know my heart. I've got 3 daughters and 3 granddaughters. We need men to be strong. We need men to stand up for truth. We need men to protect their women and their grandchildren and their children. We need men to upskill themselves and be more resourceful with what they have. We need men to speak out, because this sacrificing of the innocent, this slaughtering of the innocence in mind, innocence in spirit, and of course the innocence of what God has given us in our environment, it's going to hurt us if we don't do something about it. And we need to speak up. We need to be people who are people of truth. James said it brilliantly. It's about truth. It's about truth. And I'm not against people that are gay, straight, transgender, or heterosexual. God gives you a free will to do what you want. But we can never impose, enforce, and shove things down people's throats and make it like we're the enemy if we have a difference of opinion. That's what freedom of speech is. That's what freedom of spirit is. But of course, the globalists, the World Economic Forum, the WHO, they want to control. Listen to what Joe Biden said just a few days ago. This is Joe Biden. He said, we need more money, and we need more money, not just for jabbing the kids. That's what just passed in America, but for the future pandemic. That's a scary thought when they're already talking about that, when we've barely gotten over the last one. Someone jokingly said the other day, Fauci got COVID. So finally, COVID met its maker. And I had to laugh at that. But we know that it's not all that it seems, and we know we're not being told a lot of stuff is going on. But it's our responsibility to prepare and secure our future. So I look forward to seeing you later on the week. I'm going to be doing another rant. Of course, we've got Sunday and then next Wednesday. Please join us next Wednesday for our financial freedom event, www.mesiti.com/crypto. If we could put that in the link and the chat there, guys. It's free. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share, like, and subscribe. Oh, and one more thing. Could you follow us on Instagram? If you go to mesiti.com/links, mesiti.com/links, LINKS, You know, we've been shadow banned by Instagram. I know people are trying to find us and a lot of fake accounts out there. But if you go to mercedes.com/links, follow us there on Instagram. We want to keep feeding you and keep helping you. Go and follow George and go and follow James. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. God bless you all.